everybody. My name is Brandon Adams. Welcome into our Kroger Kickoff from inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium. You know, this season we've been in Nashville, Knoxville, Jacksonville, Athens more times than we can count. But today, the road to Atlanta culminates here for the SEC Championship game. Exactly where Georgia thought it would be to begin this season, it finds itself here right now. Maybe a different opponent than would have initially expected. Maybe thinking about a rematch with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Alabama, though, forced to be a spectator today as Georgia gets ready to take on the LSU Tigers. The Tigers, of course, 12-0, riding high as one of the most prolific offenses in all of college football, and a 7-point favorite against the Bulldogs today. We'll talk about that, a little bit of a pregame edition of our Kroger Kickoff here, and get ready to welcome in the Georgia Bulldogs themselves when they show up in just a couple of minutes. And, of course, as we've come to expect in the non-Athens version of the, and I'll use air quotes around this, dog walk, we won't see a lot of high fives, won't see a lot of hugs, won't see a lot of smiling faces. In fact, you really see no friends and family at all behind me. When you play this deep into the season, when you're still playing big games the month of December, you drive that bus right on into the stadium, you walk right in, you get your uniform on, and you get ready to play. And the eyes of the college football world will be on Georgia as it plays today, with at least one college football playoff berth on the line in this game, and possibly two, depending on how it plays out for the Georgia Bulldogs beating LSU here today. We'll take your comments on both Facebook and YouTube. We will say hello to the Dogs when they arrive here and give you a chance to have one of your final says on how things go with Georgia and LSU here today. And, of course, it's great to have you with us. And if you are not maybe following the other proceedings closely here this weekend, a bit of a surprising result last night as Oregon, a team that in a lot of ways is built very similar to Georgia, kind of a conservative offense, very good offensive line, quarterback who's a prospect. Well, Justin Herbert and the Ducks last night pulled the upset, also about a touchdown or so against Utah there in Santa Clara in the Pac-12 title game, possibly a harbinger of what a very similarly built team Georgia might be able to do against LSU here today. And the Big 12 title game that's going on as we speak. At last check, that was 10-10 between the Sooners and the Bears. But it looks like Baylor may be on its way to add some more points to that total, so keep your eyes on that with the Big 12 title game, and that's obviously interest to a lot of college football fans as well, as it would certainly seem, and we talked to ESPN's Reese Davis about this yesterday, there is a school of thought out there, and you can decide if you subscribe to this school of thought or not, that 3 of the playoff spots are already occupied between Ohio State, LSU, and Clemson, and one way or another a debate there for that 4th. So even if Georgia doesn't need a result to get into the playoff, it only needs to win its own game. There's still some intrigue and some curiosity about how things are playing out with Baylor and Oklahoma. A big start for the Sooners, and maybe at least partially reminiscent of Oklahoma instituting a 25-point comeback against Baylor in Waco a couple of weeks ago. Baylor kind of putting together their own comeback right now, although of a much smaller variety. So we'll follow the Big 12 title game. We'll see the Georgia Bulldogs when they arrive here in a moment, and we'll talk to you on both our Facebook and YouTube, Twitter comment sections as the Kroger Kickoff rolls on. I will remind you that the same way we kind of get ready for this time of year for the big tailgate for the SEC Championship game or big game-watching party around your neighborhood, there's also a lot of holiday parties going on this time of year. So if it's your family, if it's the folks you work with, if it's the folks there in your neighborhood, one of the best ways to get good friends and family together is with some really good food. And that's what Kroger provides. You know, Kroger's fresh for everyone, and they've got party platters right now starting at a great deal. Just $19.99, whether it's shrimp platter, meat and cheese tray, veggie tray, whatever else. It's one of the ways that Kroger takes really good care of you this holiday season. So stop by and see the Kroger close to you and enjoy great savings on some party platters right now. A couple minutes away from the dog walk, we'll talk to you here on both Facebook and YouTube and get ready to welcome in the Georgia Bulldogs here in just a moment. Let's go to YouTube here first, kind of pull some comments up, and we'll find out what folks are saying and what folks are getting ready to see as Georgia takes on LSU. 4 p.m. start on CBS. Brad Nessler, who you've heard from this week on Dog Nation Daily. Gary Danielson also in the booth with him. Jamie Erdahl down on the sidelines. The customary home for the SEC on CBS. That'll be the TV home for that once again here today. And our video home is at least one of those on YouTube. We will check in and kind of see what's going on. Eric Smith says if Oklahoma loses, Lincoln Riley could be heading out. Well, listen, there's already lots of rumors about Riley and various jobs in the NFL. I know that obviously there's a pocket of Falcons fans, maybe myself included, that'd love to see Riley consider an Atlanta Falcons opening if one were to come available. But there are also some published reports, some leanings that maybe the Dallas Cowboys would consider Riley, if not former Ohio State coach Urban Meyer. So one way or another, Riley is probably a bit of a name on the coaching rumor mill here this offseason. So we'll at least keep our eyes on that. By the way, another coaching rumor mill type thing, there are reports coming out of Oxford, Mississippi that while I don't believe it's been officially signed and a done deal yet, certainly looks like Lane Kiffin could be on his way to being the next Ole Miss coach. So we'll stay tuned for that in the next couple of years, or a couple of days, couple of hours. We may hear more on Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Jonathan Holland talking about Richard LeCounte. I think almost any recipe for a Georgia victory here today involves a big game from Richard LeCounte. LeCounte and Reed have just been the two bedrocks for Georgia at safety all year long. And this is one of those games where, safety is always one of the more complicated positions you have to play in college football. In a game like this, I think that's probably especially true given the fact that you've got to worry about the ball over your head. Obviously, Joe Burrow's trying to hit the big passing plays, but you've also got to be aware of what's happening in front of you. Not only is Clyde Edwards-Helaire a terrific running back, that's a guy that LSU's not afraid to throw the ball to at times there as well. So safeties, sometimes in man coverage on wide receivers, other times having to be aware of the football when it's in front of them. That's a lot for both LeCounte and Reed to think about in today's game. I'll remind you that even though it was a game in which the Bulldogs came up short, Richard LeCounte did have an interception in last year's SEC championship game. And if LeCounte can repeat that feat here this particular day, then obviously UGA's chances of winning have just gone up pretty considerably. So good comments so far. We'll take a few more. Alex MLD says, anything new on DeAndre Swift? Good question. After the two coaches' press conferences from yesterday, as the Red Coat Band comes filing in behind me, after the two coaches' press conferences from yesterday, it's basically kind of a radio silence now for both teams as they get a chance to go back to their hotels, go through their practice, and kind of do their typical night before the game routine. So from this standpoint, it's essentially a radio silence situation. I think the opinion that rules the day right now is that Swift will play, and as I've been suggesting this week on Dog Nation Daily, he'll attempt to give it a go at less than 100%. And what we'll all be tuned in to find out is how much less than 100% he is and what that potential percentage equates to in terms of his effectiveness in a game like this. I'll remind you of the Auburn game where we had similar questions about Lawrence Cager dealing with a different injury at the time than the one that ultimately ended the season, back when it was ribs and shoulder for Lawrence Cager. Comes in, gets a catch early, then leaves the game, and we never heard from him again. It'll be in those early stages of this game we find out just how much Swift is expected to be effective. If he's on the field but not getting carries, if he's on the field but being used as a decoy, then that's obviously a hint that maybe Georgia is thinking better of using him too much today because of the pain that he may be in with that shoulder contusion. But if it's a couple, 2, 3, 4 carries early in this game and they're able to go for some positive yardage and Georgia seems content to feed him the football, that means at that point in time that Georgia obviously believes it's got itself a healthy running back, which of course increases the possibility that Georgia's able to win a game like this. So like all Georgia fans, I'll be tuned in very carefully, looking in very closely to see what it looks like with DeAndre Swift a little bit later on. Great question. Appreciate you weighing in. We'll get more on Facebook here in a moment as the Red Coat get ready to get settled in their seats inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium. In a lot of ways, it's going to feel like a home away from home for UGA today. The expectation, as many as 60% of the crowd, if not more, maybe 65, 70% today, could be dressed in red and black. And, of course, nothing makes it feel like a Georgia home game more than a big performance from the Red Coat Band. And we'll look forward to hearing them later on in the stadium as they get ready to get set up and get ready to go there. More of your comments coming in here on YouTube. Let's find out what other folks have to say. Ron Warbington says, tell Ed Orgeron we like our champagne cold. So Ron's feeling pretty good about a chance to maybe celebrate a little bit later on today. Certainly excited about that possibility. Shannon Gilliam also making a UGA prediction here. 27-24, he says, I pray. So confident in the pick, but maybe also holding out hope that maybe he gets the blessing that he's seeking there on that one. That's a good comment. Bill Devlin says that he thinks that James Cook eats a ton today. And turning to James Cook, some would be necessary carries for Cook would obviously be something a lot of Georgia fans would like to see. Obviously, Zamir White's another one of those backs there as well that Georgia could lean on. We know one way or another, even if DeAndre Swift is completely healthy, we know that DeAndre Swift is going to, we know, let me see if I can get all my running backs down. We know that Brian Harrion is going to get a lot of carries no matter what. So even if Swift is healthy, Harrion's going to still have a big role in this game. It's the reduced role for Swift that could potentially mean more for guys like Zamir White, guys like James Cook. Those are obviously things that we'll be watching closely. A couple more on YouTube, then we'll pop over and check things out on Facebook here for a moment. Savage predicting a monster day from Azeez Ojulari. Obviously, a big day from Georgia in a pass rush situation would certainly go a long way towards giving the Dogs a chance to win. Joe Burrow's one of those guys that you have to pick your spots. You can't get too predictable in terms of trying to send the extra pressure, and Azeez Ojulari won't be a part of that. He'll be his own one-man pass rush in some instances. But how you attack Burrow, whether it be dropping guys back in coverage, trying to bring the extra pressure, or just beating guys off the edge, Ojulari will obviously be a big part of that. I think that's a really good comment. TM checking in to say, how about them Dogs? And TM, we say, how about them Dogs, right back to you. And we appreciate you being a part of our Kroger Kickoff as we get ready for Georgia and LSU coming up at 4 p.m. And, of course, we'll see the Dogs walk by us in just a moment. I'll also give you a extra programming note that is a part of our outsized grown-up coverage of the SEC Championship here today. We hope to be with you for a second edition of our Kroger Kickoff a few minutes after we're off the air here. We'll be set up inside the stadium and give you a little bit of a glimpse of the early proceedings of warm-ups and what's going on inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium to the field, which is right in front of me to my left. We'll hopefully be able to show you some of that here coming up in just a little bit. For now, though, more of your comments on Facebook as we wait for the Georgia Bulldogs to arrive and get things going for the SEC Championship. Should be coming up any minute now. Next couple minutes we should see them pop in here and be ready to arrive. Paul Mote says the offensive line's got to have a big day for Georgia, and leaning on the success of what this group has been doing all season long and really the expectation for what they were going to be at the beginning of the year. I mean, go back to that preseason conversation. We had big bets on the Georgia offensive line, big belief that this was going to be one of the real centerpiece position groups in all of college football. And today is a chance for them to really add to that reputation and show up big in a big way. Obviously, LSU knows that Georgia wants to try to run the football, but that doesn't mean that Georgia can abandon the run. Maybe that was something that happened too much when these two teams played in October of 2018 in Baton Rouge. Today, even against a stacked box, Georgia's still got to find a way to run it some, which means you lean on those offensive linemen. And you hope that this group is healthier than it's been, and you hope that the rotation that includes guys like Cade Mays, potentially as a super sub or potentially as a starter, a guy like Jamari Salyer, who got some extended playing time last Saturday against Georgia Tech, that at least 7 deep in terms of guys that you trust to be able to play, that group will show up and have a big day against LSU later on this afternoon. Tina Batson-Boyette likes seeing the Redcoats walking by. Excited to see that. Jaqual Black says, talking about the Sugar Bowl situation for Georgia. Yeah, Georgia hopes to avoid that Sugar Bowl. Obviously, that's a pretty fun bowl to be in, but Georgia hopes to be in a slightly different postseason destination, either back here in Atlanta again for the Peach Bowl or heading out to Arizona for the Fiesta Bowl as part of the college football playoff. That is the prize that's on the line when Georgia takes on LSU this afternoon at 4 p.m. Tavares Terry says somebody's going to be the baddest, and obviously that's what Georgia hopes to be. Since somebody's going to be the baddest, a lot of Georgia fans say, why not our team? And the Dogs say, why not us? It's really part of the narrative they've tried to establish dating back to the beginning of the calendar year and certainly during the summer at the forefront of the beginning of the summer camp and the beginning of 2019 practices, the mantra of do more. That slogan as a reminder that the feeling of, as someone said a moment ago, being in the Sugar Bowl a year ago, and the way the dull thud arrived as the season came to a close, the SEC championship, the near miss against Alabama. No one wants to revisit those feelings. No one wants to return to those memories. That's what do more is all about. And do more has led Georgia right here. And on this turf, in this building, on this ground is the day where Georgia has a chance to make good on the promise and the goal that it set for itself many months ago. On Facebook, as your comments continue to roll in, Andrew Kelly says, hey, guy, reading comments on the phone with a microphone. Please make a prediction for the Clemson game, too. So that's pretty much my job in a nutshell. I stand here with a microphone in my hand, a phone in my hand, and I just sort of spout off predictions. So I'll give you one on Clemson. Of all the favorites in bowl games, I should say in conference championship games today, the one that I'm the most certain is most likely to cover its big number. Clemson's about a 28, 29-point favorite against Virginia. Clemson, for me, is the most certain because they're playing the worst competition of really any of the teams in the Power 5 conference championship games. They may have the most motivation to go out there and get a blowout win, coupled with the opponent in which they're playing. Dabo Swinney's obviously shot off his mouth a lot. He wants to send a message to what he has conjured up as, at least in his mind, doubters of the Clemson program. So there could be some motivation for that from the Clemson perspective. So if we see a big favorite show up in a big way today, my guess for the most likely spot for that to occur would be in Charlotte for the ACC championship game. So I appreciate you weighing in, and I appreciate you sharing your question. Trish Wilson says, let's go Dogs from Florida. Good to have you checking in, Trish. We appreciate that. Ken Feinberg says, I think we keep contained this year. That's obviously something that Georgia wants to do. They are very well aware of Joe Burrow's ability to not just make it happen through the air, which he clearly does. People don't really think of Joe Burrow necessarily as a dual-threat quarterback, but in terms of his ability to run and make things happen with his legs, he's quite potent. Not just keeping plays alive, but when needed, cutting up and running upfield for positive yardage. That's something that Burrow's got the capability of doing. And so keeping contained, which means not blitzing him too much and not getting undisciplined when a guy like Ojulari, who's been mentioned before, kind of shows up in a pass rush situation, that's an important part of that too. So, yeah, keeping that contained is definitely something that Georgia wants to try to do as the final few members of the Red Coat Band file through, which can mean we're only a couple of minutes away from the Dawgs themselves having arrived and being here and getting ready to go. I like Philip Jordan Wells' comment on Facebook saying this is essentially a quarterfinal game for Georgia, and really it's very easy to look at it that way. If Georgia wins, we know what its fate's going to be, and then beyond that, it just becomes a matter of where and against whom. And so that's what makes this time of year really fun. You know, I argue about the college football playoff all the time, but I think this conversation is a welcome addition to the college football calendar and a sort of favored part of the college football landscape for me. So the fact that we, as fans of this team and fans of the sport, get a chance to participate in this conversation one way or another, I think we're kind of lucky to be able to do that. I'm looking forward to doing that a whole lot more throughout the day today, and you never know what might be going down tomorrow when we find out some more information in a positive sense of who Georgia might be playing if things go well here this afternoon. Cale Westbrook says need the performance to equal the potential today, and I think that's a fair thing to say. A Georgia team that has been near the front of the national polls preseason and during the season, virtually all season long, and yet maybe an opportunity to prove that they're even more than what you've seen so far, even better than what we thought they could be. And doing that in the big games is always the best way to measure that. And games don't come much bigger than one that Georgia's about to play. I'll remind you back what Kirby Smart said on Saturday for the first time, and he's repeated a couple times since then, that when you think about big game backdrops, when you think about locales, when you think about energy inside a stadium, there may not be anything in football that rivals the SEC championship. Now, obviously, a lot of us are partisans for the league, so it's not a surprise to hear me say that. But Smart, who can be more measured in the things that he says, he certainly wouldn't be under any kind of obligation to say anything like that if he didn't feel that way. And apparently he does, because he held nothing back in comparing it favorably to Super Bowls and college football playoff games and anything else. And having been in a bunch of SEC championship games, not just the ones involving the Dogs, but the ones involving other teams as well, I can tell you that feeling you get where the hair stands up at the back of your neck, where you really feel like you're in kind of a transcendent moment, I think the SEC championship game does a better job of providing that than almost any football game I've ever been to. So today, big stage, big opponent, big audience, national televised, huge crowd. Watched this on TV last year to the tune of millions. Then for Georgia to live up to its potential today on this stage, well, that's a pretty good big game proving ground for that to take place. It's our Kroger Kickoff. The Dog Walk is on the way, or at least a version of the Dog Walk, as we expect the team to come sailing right past us here in just a couple of moments. Of course, let me remind you that this holiday season, some really fun things going on at Kroger. As I've been telling you, a series of book signings with the legendary former Georgia coach and athletic director, Vince Dooley. He's written a number of books, not just about football, but about history and gardening and other topics. He'll sign those at Kroger's around the Atlanta and North Georgia area. So if you go to DawgNation.com, right there at the top of the page, there's a really easy link for you to click into and find out more about where Coach Dooley's going to be, when he's going to be close to you. You can see the full schedule when you check out DawgNation.com, and I hope you'll check that out. And, of course, we appreciate you checking us out on the Kroger Kickoff here today. More of your comments on Facebook, then we'll get YouTube here in a moment. Harry Dawg coming by here. Georgia cheerleaders also making their way in there as well. The big game vibe, feeling pretty good here. Everybody having a really good time. Great to be able to see that. Lucy Boykin also hoping to see Kenny McIntosh a little bit today. That'd be a fun thing, the freshman running back involved in the action for the Dogs here today. You'd like to be able to see that. Ren Estes says the Junkyard Dogs are back. And obviously, given the way this Georgia defense has played thus far this season, that nickname once bestowed on the great defenses of Irk Russell, certainly that feels like a befitting nickname for this Georgia team right now. I certainly think that's fair to say. William and Elaine Morgan talking about Jake Fromm leading some extended drives today. Obviously, that's something that you hope to be able to see. Fromm executing that. No one is probably better in college football at reading plays in the line of scrimmage, noticing what a defense is doing, and Jake Fromm in terms of getting his team where it needs to be for the right kind of play to help Georgia do just that. I think today could be a big day for Jake Fromm to do very much those same kind of things. More of your comments kind of running in here on Facebook. We'll be back to YouTube after that. Chris Tittle says, we can't get in a shootout with LSU. If so, they'll run us out of Atlanta. And I will admit that I think there's two kinds of games that Georgia's not likely to win. A game where you have to beat them 16-13 or 19-13 or 19-16. I think that's too low of a score to ask from the Georgia defense against LSU's offense today. I also would probably assume that Georgia's probably not going to win a game 45-40, something like that. That's just a game played at a pace that Georgia's probably not that comfortable with. The winning team is probably the one that best dictates the pace, and a Georgia pace that could lead to a victory today is something along the lines of 28-27, 27-26, maybe 30-28. Something along those lines might be what gets it done today. The recipe here is simply said, but not quite as easily done. Georgia's got to score a few more points against Power 5 competition than it's typically done, and it's got to hold LSU to a few less points than it's typically gotten in some of the big games that it's played this season. If Georgia can do that, once again, easier said than done, but if Georgia can do that, that could very well be a recipe for victory. We'll have the Georgia team showing up and arriving here in just a moment. It's our Kroger Kickoff, and good to have you with us. Let's pop back over to YouTube. By the way, when the team arrives, one of the things you'll see me do is I'll just simply step out of the view of the camera. So when they're here, I'll be out of your way, and you'll be able to see all of them. And you'll be able to see what I'm imagining is going to be a look of focused determination as Georgia takes on LSU at 4 p.m. today. More of your comments coming up here on YouTube. Green Soldier checking in says that David Pollack sees the talent and production disparities on the offense. I do too. Coley needs to be back as an assistant offensive coordinator. We need Bobo to come in. So obviously, I know that Bobo being back on the open market is certainly a hot topic that's out there right now. I think for now, and listen, I'm a fan of Bobo as an offensive mind. I am. I think for now, Kirby Smart's earned the right to try to go out there today, play this game his way, which means his plays with his players and his coaches. And if Kirby Smart wins today, then he's going to be able to look at a lot of folks and say, hey, this was kind of part of my plan all along. Play good defense, do the things offensively that we're capable of doing with the personnel that we have. And so it'll be interesting to see what the narrative about the Georgia offense becomes once this game is over, because obviously for a lot of Georgia fans, it's been anxiety producing this year, but that's not necessarily indicative of the way that Kirby Smart feels about this. Kirby Smart has designed this program a certain way, and even if it's not always the thing that every fan wants it to be, it has gotten Georgia to the place that they do want to be, and Kirby might say, and the blueprint that I put in place is kind of what's allowed it to be here. So let's see what the Georgia offensive conversation looks like with personnel and coaches and play calling and everything else once the result comes in for this 13th game against LSU. Good comment from the Green Soldier. Devin Glenn feeling confident right now, and that's a great thing to be able to hear. Kayla Farr checking in on the comment section here today. Elizabeth Corizon says, what if Georgia, and I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, what if Georgia loses 43-40? Do you think we still get in as a two-loss team? Well, obviously that would depend on what happens with Baylor and Oklahoma. And here's my only take on this. There are actually probably a lot of Georgia fans who would kind of roll their eyes a little bit at Georgia making too strong of a case for itself as a two-loss team, just given the fact that it lost to South Carolina. But here's the thing you got to understand. You got to put somebody in the fourth spot. And I think the conversation for what the fourth team will look like in the playoff could end up being really, really different than you might think. The notion that Baylor, if it were to win the Big 12 title game, would be rubber-stamped as a 12-1 conference champion, I don't quite think it works out quite that same way. This is a Baylor program that was passed over by the playoff committee before back in 2014. So keep that in the back of your mind when they had a pretty strong case to be in the college football playoff. This is also a team, while they don't have the loss to 4-win South Carolina, they do have kind of a squeak-by loss to a 3-win Rice team. A double overtime game against like a 4-win Texas Tech team. Certainly a team with a losing record. A 6-point win against West Virginia. So, the idea that Baylor, if it wins the Big 12 title game today, is going to have an incorrigible, am I using that word correctly, incorrigible playoff resume, I don't necessarily think that's the case. Now, it may not be that Georgia that benefits from that. I'll certainly grant you that. But the idea that Baylor is an easy shoe-in for the college football playoff, I don't quite think the committee is as predictable as that. So, that's my 2 cents. You can sort of file that away with a grain of salt, and we'll see how that goes later on. Heath Dotson says, I want BA to give his score prediction. So here is my, I guess, sort of best result for the game this year. Now, I took the under in the game. I'm also bad at math, so I may give you a number here that actually equals the over. But, something along the lines of 28-27 or 27-26 or something like that. I don't know that you want either of these two teams scoring 30 today to make it feel like the best possible case. And I guess I'd think that 30 might be the absolute most that I think that Georgia would score in a winning effort. That gives you some room for Rodrigo Blankenship to be a factor, but it also gives you some opportunities for Georgia to turn scoring opportunities into touchdowns. Really, I think you can't score more than that. And, I think if you allow the Tigers to get up in those 30s, at that point in time, you're talking about a much more challenging game for UGA. But I'm glad you asked the question. TM says, I'm not scared at all. Helmets on helmets, and that's a good way to say that. Sergeant AR10, and Sergeant's good to have you with us, says he thinks LSU loses today, which is certainly good news. Our buddy Bubby Dean checks in to say 26 for UGA. He gives us 4 field goals, 2 touchdowns. Dawgs hold LSU to the same 23 as Auburn did in Baton Rouge, 26-23. Go Dawgs, do more, beat LSU. Bubby, sounds good to me. I like the sound of it. Michael Porter also feeling confident here as well. Lloyd Dawg checking in. Appreciate that. Green Soldier, also appreciate your comments. Hayden B checks in to say time for the Georgia Bulldogs to get that's a LSU fan checking in. Well, listen, LSU fans are obviously excited about this game there as well. Dallas Schwartz checking in to say, BA looking sharp. Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. I told you on Dog Nation Daily that I was going to change up my typical game day attire, just kind of see how things go. So hopefully that'll work out. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how that plays out. And, of course, we're here as part of our Kroger Kickoff with the Georgia Bulldogs slated to arrive just behind us. A lot of security in position. Haven't seen the kind of – there's a certain type of milling about that you see right before Georgia arrives. I haven't really seen too much of that milling about just yet. So, unfortunately, we're probably still a couple of minutes at least from this Georgia team arriving, which means you'll have to listen to me blather on just for a little bit. Adam Speiler says, today the offensive line is going to prove that there are multiple first-rounders on there. Adam, I like the sound of that. Certainly a big day from the Georgia offensive line would be a very important component to virtually any UGA win. I think that's probably really true. Andrew Kelly says, is UGA going to struggle? I love the real bias here. Well, Andrew, I appreciate that. Paul Moat says offensive line holds. He says 42 points for Georgia. Wow, that'd be impressive. Clay Dyke's prediction, 35-21 Dogs win. Josh Townsend says, play loose, have fun, go Dogs, sick 'em. And I do think that, and listen, I'm no psychologist, but I do think the whole notion of playing loose, I think it's a really important thing to find in a game like this. And it can be difficult. I mean, to be honest with you, I do this job each and every day, each and every Saturday. And on a day like this, coming to this stadium for this game, even I was like a little bit more butterflies in the stomach. I didn't sleep very good last night, and I'm not going to play. And, frankly, the nervousness is more about just the acknowledgement that it's a big game. Acknowledgement that this is a moment that feels a little bit different than some others. Acknowledging that that this is the kind of the kind of day where resumes are written. Looks like we might be getting a little closer to Georgia showing up, but maybe not quite yet. So how you play loose in an environment like this, how you walk in that stadium and look around. I can tell you that yesterday to see both Georgia and LSU get their chance to be on the turf, to look around. Georgia, at least to my eyes, and obviously it's difficult to read too much into body language, Georgia in that moment at least appeared to be pretty loose. They've been in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They know what it looks like. The halo board when you first walk in here, circular around the top instead of the regular video board that you see on the ends, just a very different looking thing than the typical stadium has. Georgia's kind of gotten used to seeing that. There were more LSU guys yesterday, eyes up, looking around, almost like a tourist in New York City for the first time. There were more phones out for the LSU players, kind of capturing that moment. Georgia didn't feel as much of a need to capture that yesterday. So read into that what you will. Obviously, it's difficult to tell from those early proceedings which of these teams is the loosest. But your overall point of games like this being won by the team that compartmentalizes the emotion makes the game no bigger than it needs to be, as big as it's supposed to be, but not a moment bigger. I think that's an important part of this game, and it's obviously sometimes difficult to tell who's going to be the most likely to do that, but I think that's a really good comment. How about this listen to this from Joyce Dugan. Boy, you don't want to go over to Joyce's house. Got hot chili, cornbread, and barbecue sliders today on the menu. Listen, I think that's a championship game style menu right there, Joyce. That's very impressive, actually. You got to have that big championship game style menu. You got to have that going on a day like this. A lot of people would have just said it's either chili or sliders, but the fact that you're going barbecue sliders with the chili, I feel like that's a pretty impressive performance. So, Joyce, I really appreciate you letting us know about that, and I'm sure whoever's coming over today is going to have themselves a very good time. Carl Carr feeling pretty good about the game today. Gerald Harmon talking about Ojulari says, B.J. Ojulari showing out last night for Marietta. Yeah, Marietta got the win over Parkview last night. They move on to the state championship, and Lowndes took care of North Gwinnett. So that's your highest classification state championship game next weekend. It'll be Lowndes against Marietta, so that'll be a fun one to watch. Yeah, good stuff there around the state of Georgia last night with state semifinal action. Ken Feinberg says, wish you could see Georgia some 2 and even 3 running back set. So he likes the idea of multiple running backs on the field at the same time. I'll step out of the way and give you a chance to see the Georgia Bulldogs as they show up here for the dog walk. It is Kirby Smart who's going to be the first out of the box here. He's on his way in. Georgia getting ready to make its way behind them. Smart got the headphones on, listening to a little bit of music. Calm demeanor as he'll lead the team through the locker room. In the past, they have gone to the field first just to look around, but they had a chance to do that yesterday. May go straight to the locker room right now. Jake Fromm coming by, Ben Cleveland. There's offensive coordinator James Coley making his way in, along with Isaiah Wilson and Cade Mays, Charlie Werner, the tight end. There is DeAndre Swift making his way through. Obviously, no way to tell how much pain Swift may be in just by walking from the waist down. Swift's essentially a 100% healthy running back. It's only from the shoulder up that he's having some challenges, some difficulties. You see Andrew Thomas and Solomon Kinley making their way through here. The Georgia offensive line, a big part of what's expected to go down here today. There's the group's coach, Sam Pittman, as well as Nate McBride at linebacker. Georgia players continuing to file through. Notori Johnson, who got some extended action last week against Georgia Tech. Justin Schaefer still sporting that neck brace. There's Adam Anderson, shades on, as he makes his way in here right now. Nolan Smith. The Georgia players making their way through. Very different than a home game dog walk. No smiles, no hugs. It's game face all the way around. Sharp look for Trayvon Walker. Very nicely appointed handbag for Mr. Walker. There's Dominic Blaylock, of course, with Lawrence Cager not playing. George Pickens out for the first half. Blaylock could be called upon in a big way. Malik Herring comes by. Sharp suit on Demetrius Robertson. Georgia continues to make its way through. Jarvis Jones, former Jew at UGA great, now a student assistant coming through. Here's Richard LeCount, who some of our listeners and viewers mentioned earlier, sporting some sharp sneakers there. What is that? Prada sneakers for Richard LeCount, looking pretty good there. Pretty sharp all the way around. As Georgia continues to come on through, for the most part, players and coaches have now made their way through. Some of the Georgia staffers will be some of the final folks to walk in here. And it looks like the dog walk for the SEC championship has kind of officially concluded as Georgia gets ready to be inside the locker room. They'll get dressed. They'll be on the field in about an hour's time, going through warm-ups. Of course, kickoffs at 4 p.m. So we'll end this version of the Kroger Kickoff for now, but check back in with you on video again on the Dog Nation video channels, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, in just a few minutes from inside the stadium once those warm-ups begin, to give you a sense of how healthy DeAndre Swift looks in that moment and what the wide receiver situation looks like in the absence of Cager and Pickens for the first half. We'll show all of that to you coming up. Thanks for being on this edition of our Kroger Kickoff, and, of course, enjoy the game, everybody.